Hello, and welcome back to The Art of the Spiel, the podcast covering the 24th season of PatORG. I'm Sarah from season 22, and with me is my co host, also from season 22, Nico. Hi, Nico. How's it going today?
Hey Sarah, yeah, I'm very excited about this one as I am for all of them, but yeah, just really looking forward to getting into this recap this time for sure.
Awesome. So, yeah, I'm very excited to introduce our guest for today. She fed the worms all season long with amazing vidcons, amazing gameplay, and was rewarded as the runner up of the season and player of the season. It's DeLuca. Welcome in, DeLuca. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for your lovely introduction. I'm very excited to be here and talk about my game and all of the things that happened. Should be fun.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you. So thank you for taking the time. I know it's been an overwhelmingly emotionally charged season. Hopefully, you've had a little time to relax since it ended. So, how have you been feeling stepping back from the craziness that was season 24?
Um, I will say that since stopping the game, I do feel like my hands don't know what to do with themselves, considering I was on my phone so much during this season. Um, I don't know if you guys have ever done anything like musical theater or anything like that, but it's kind of like like almost like a post-show depression where you don't know what to do with yourself for a long time. But it has been nice to step away a little bit just so I can, spend time with my daughter and my husband again and remember what it's like to be a human outside of the ORG space. So I'm enjoying it though. It's nice.
Yes, absolutely. So going back and reading some of your early confessionals, I saw in your
Oh.
sort of pregame questions, you said you spectated last season closely. Was there anything you took from watching that season and any notes you had about how that impacted how you wanted to approach this game coming in?
Uh, well, to be honest, I came in kind of partway through the season. I wasn't there the entire time, and to be honest, I had absolutely no idea what was going on the entire time I was watching. Um, but I do remember seeing there was one person who did VidCons a lot, and I think it was Joe. And I remember watching those and thinking, okay, I want to do VidCons. And I also saw people talking a lot about like how they wanted to get to know people, and I noticed that the people who talked game too often were the ones that people kind of strayed away from. So I knew that I wanted to come into it not talking too much game initially so that I could get to know people to work with them that way, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. You sort of outlined your pre-game strategy as going to be listening and cataloging everything everyone says, and someone people could trust. And you didn't really want to become a target early on. Well, that
Mhm.
maybe didn't happen, but you said you wanted to be laid back. Um, and that wasn't, I think that's a good approach to have. Obviously, you have to adjust when things don't work out that way, but we start the season here with two big tribes. You have a lot of people to talk to on your tribe. What were your thoughts as the marooning happened and you started to have the chance to get to know the people on your tribe?
Well, first, I wasn't even sure if we were allowed to DM people. I thought we would have to make like individual alliance chats with every single person we wanted to talk to. So at first, I didn't say anything. And then I believe Danny was the first person to reach out to me. And I said, okay, now I can go and start talking with people. And at first, it was definitely very overwhelming. In person, I am not a very talkative person, I'm not very social. So that was definitely a big struggle for me in the beginning, but I think I kind of went into it trying to come off as like as kind as humanly possible so that people in the event of a vote out would feel bad voting me out. And I think that did kind of play to my advantage a bit. But that's kind of how I started it because I didn't want to start with game talk initially. So that's kind of how it all became what it was at the end.
I think that definitely came across. I mean, I think you were someone whose name was definitely out there as people just really liking at the start. And so much so that the thought of you also like already being branded as this potential social threat came up on literally like very early, which I don't think is something we see that quickly. Um, how did it feel? So I think there was at one point this sort of game of telephone in a sense, where Chris had got information that you were supposedly targeting him at this first round, which is kind of crazy all to think about and how things ended up going. Um, but yeah, so how did it feel knowing that once Chris kind of got that information, I believe he kind of took that, wanted to like sort of counter that with potentially targeting you. So your name kind of got out there quite early on. And we did see in confessionals you talking about how much you wanted to be here, and how it would suck to be the first person to go home. So what did it feel like knowing that your name was already being out there as a potential person that might be getting looked at?
Well, to be completely honest, I was initially really, really bummed out about that because, I mean, as everyone saw in my confessionals, like doing this whole org thing wasn't just, to play a fun game. I felt like I almost needed to do it for my own sanity and separating myself from being a new mom. I wanted to be something other than that. So I was so excited to do it. And for some reason, I had a feeling that I would be brought up in the beginning. So I was trying to mentally prepare for that anyways. And whether that was my anxiety or if I'm a psychic, um, I had to kind of figure out what to do with that. And it did really suck going into it like that. And I mean, I'm glad that it worked out and everything, but it was something I had to really come to terms with. That was like, I might not get the chance to actually do what I wanted to do here, but I think that because of my social game that I had from the very beginning, the connections that I had already made with people, I think that that was kind of the pinnacle part of my gameplay was, and that was what made me feel a little more confident in my gameplay as well, was I was able to get that vote off my back by making Chris feel bad and having him apologize to me, all just by talking to him about things other than the game. You know what I mean? So I felt like that was the moment where I was like, okay, so my game is going to be primarily social and I'm going to use this to my advantage. And I would say that it worked. I think that was your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely one of the most social players of the season, if not the most like sort of exemplary case of a social game. We do ultimately see that you end up bidding on, I believe it's called the Melancholic Tulip for the auction, and you end up winning it.
Yeah.
So that's already a kind of, I guess, a sizable chunk of your money gone
Yep.
at the beginning, and it does give you that one round immunity. So that must have been nice to kind of know at the very least, you know, you weren't going to end up in that spot of being that first boot. So at what point did you feel like, like obviously it's nice to have that safety, but was there a point where kind of recovering from the Chris situation and speaking with him and having him apologize to you that you thought, you know what, I'm probably not going to end up needing this?
I think basically what ended up happening is that Chris had told me that he had bid on the idol as well as a fail safe. And I don't know if this is fully true, but he said that he took his bid off because he wanted me to be able to bid for it and have it. So hearing that from him and as a naive, very brand new player, I think that gave me a little bit more hope. And I think that because he did that, and also I knew that he was going around to other people saying, actually, let's go for someone who's not as online because they're liability, aka CJ, because Mars, shocker, won immunity that round. Um, I think that kind of started to help my case a little bit and started to make me feel a little bit more comfortable, along with going around to other people and just kind of trying to pull them in emotionally, telling them how important this game was to me, which was in part a game move, but was also the truth. And I think that's partially kind of the story of my entire gameplay and kind of what messed me up at Final Tribal Council is that, I did come into this game to make friends and to win, and I think that people couldn't see that as a possibility, in their mind it's like, no, you just wanted to win. You didn't want to make friends, like you're lying. And it's hard because that's the truth. I wanted to get to know people, yes, to advance my game, but also because I like talking to people online and, thinking about, learning stuff about them. Um but in terms of that first vote, I would say that I started to feel better after Chris told me that he took his bid out for that. And that's when I started to feel more comfortable and safe.
At any point, did you consider not playing the tulip once you started to get your bearings and sort of feel the vote shifting onto CJ? And also, what was your strategy in terms of who you were going to tell that you had this idol?
I think towards the end, the only reason I actually played it is because I knew that it was only good for that round. Um, and I didn't want to just buy it and then not use it in the, very off chance that I would need it. Um, so I decided to play it just because I could and I knew I wouldn't be able to use it another round. Um, And I think I actually did end up telling a decent amount of people that I had it because I wanted them to tell CJ that I was the decoy name because he had already heard that I was potentially going home. So I said, well, you guys can use me as the decoy because I have an idol, which may have looked like a big game move on my part, but I kind of wanted to try and open some kind of bridge of initial subconscious trust with people by giving them that information. Because I knew that if I say, hey, I have an idol, they're going to go, oh man, she must really trust me because she told me that, even though I knew I could only use it for that round, so I didn't care about telling people. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with that.
Yeah, I think that was a smart way to go about it because you knew you were going to play it. And if you're playing an idol and people don't know about it, they're probably less likely to trust you going forward, saying, oh, she didn't tell me she had that. So I thought that was really smart. The second vote is Mars here, who is someone who is going to be the target for the first vote due to being a little more inactive, but she wins immunity, of course. Um, and something I remember about this vote, it was very easy, I think, for most of your tribe to put the vote onto Mars. But I think you struggled a little bit with it because you did want to get to know her better and you did want to work with her more. Was this sort of like the first spot where you're like, oh man, like voting people out is going to be harder than I thought?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on a personal level, I felt bad for Mars because one, I knew that she had an ear infection that she was talking about, and two, I knew that she didn't really get to make many personal connections with anybody. And I thought in my little brain that, I could use that to my advantage and kind of pull her under my wing and, for lack of better wording, use her as a number in some cases. But I also knew that so many of the people on the tribe were gunning for her because she was the easy vote. Nobody else wanted to go home, everyone else wanted to play. So going for someone who isn't on as often felt not only like the easy option, but other people felt like it was the right thing to do so that we'd have a chance at challenges, even though we killed it the entire time before the swap. But I did feel bad because I did get to talk with her a little bit just about personal things, about our mutual love of cats. And I love the emojis that she used. She was very wholesome. So, it was a hard vote for me. And I think that was the first time where I realized, like, oh crap, this is probably going to get pretty emotional. And little did I know that it would for other reasons. Um, but yeah, no, I did feel bad, and part of me does wonder that if she would have stayed, if the game would have played out a little bit differently, if I could have had her as a very loyal ally from the get-go. But it didn't work out that way, so.
Yeah, I think definitely you can sometimes not realize the sort of emotional weight it can have, especially if you're someone coming into this trying to make friends and obviously want to have as good an experience you have. Obviously, there is that part at the end of each round if you've not got immunity that you're going to have to vote someone out. So we do end up seeing when Mars gets voted out, she then name drops you and some of your alliance members, uh, kind of saying, "Yeah, I was allied with these guys, and they've obviously voted me out." So both from I guess an emotional standpoint, but also strategically, what was your reaction to that?
So to be honest, with Mars's name dropping, I was kind of confused initially because she had also mentioned Chase and saying that me, Chris, and Chase, I think that was the three she name dropped, were all aligned, and I was unaware that she was aligned with Chase. So in a way, I think I kind of dodged a bullet there. I knew that from the beginning I already had a small target on my back because of the CJ vote. So then add that onto it, I knew that was going to be another thing I needed to scramble with. So I went to the people that I was allied with following that, just pleading my case of like, hey, I don't know what she's talking about. We talked about cats, and if that means we're aligned, then that means we were aligned. But I personally didn't think so, even though I was. I just didn't want to make that known. Um, but it kind of put into perspective for me that this is a bit different than the real Survivor, obviously, because a lot of the time when people are voted out in the real Survivor, they don't really name drop unless they're really pissed off. So I tried to make it my mission to be even nicer to people if I could, so that if they did get voted out, they wouldn't name drop me and ruin my strategic game. And that did happen a couple times, but obviously I made it to the end, so it wasn't that big of an issue. So yeah, I was definitely a little confused about that, but it ended up being fine because everyone forgot about it. So.
Yeah, I think even I remember when we were spectating, the mention of Chase definitely threw a few of us off. So they kind of correctly identified the four-person alliance of you, Joey, Chris, and Mars. So I think that kind of helped obscure things from your end, which was really good. As you already mentioned, you guys end up kind of killing it with the sort of challenges and don't end up going back to tribal for a really long time. But this next episode was when you seemed to start on the idol hunt. That seemed to be something that we ended up seeing kind of happening in parallel with sort of Chris also doing it on Guggenheim. So was that something that you kind of managed to get independently, or was this something that you and Chris were talking about and kind of doing at the same time?
Well, with that specific idol hunt, I knew that there were people on our tribe definitely looking for it, but I also knew that Chris was looking for it because, first off, one of my cats is chasing something up. Sorry. Um, I asked Chris about it because I knew that we were both kind of needing something like that because at this point we were working together a little bit more. Um, so I was somewhat aware of that, and then I saw that we were both doing the emoji thing and went, okay, yeah, this is definitely, something we're both doing. So at that point, I tried to get in with Chris on his good graces as much as I possibly could, knowing that there was potential that if he had it and he was allied with me, that would give me some semblance of safety in the game, and that eventually I did end up getting it from him. So that did work out in my favor. So I was aware that he was looking. I wasn't sure if there was anyone else until we got to the swap and I saw that Danny and Chase were both doing the emoji thing as well. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned like kind of getting it's kind of cool that kind of getting a heads up on what other people might do kind of clues you into where they are when they're doing the idol hunt as well. So seeing things like the emojis, I think, is really cool to kind of have that intel. As you mentioned, you do end up getting the idol from Chris. I think Chris has since mentioned post game that there was a bit of sort of a discussion about kind of not necessarily a script from my understanding, but there was kind of this idea that you guys would play it up for the spectators.
Oh yeah.
How was that for you? Was that a bit of fun, or like, yeah, how did you feel about all that?
Honestly, that was one of my favorite things in the entire game. So Chris had originally come to me just saying, "Hey, I have this idol, and I feel like it might be better in your hands, but the spectators will murder me, I'm assuming, if I just give it to you flat out. So we need to pretend that that you're buying it from me, okay?" And I was like, "All right, I can get behind that." So I initially said $40 and then realized that I don't even have enough to transfer it $40. So I said, actually, you know what? I want it for $20. And he gave it to me. But initially, there wasn't even going to be any kind of transaction. But I think this was at the point in the game where I was like, I have no idea what the spectators think of me. He has no idea what the spectators think of him. So we just wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. So, yes, unfortunately, it was scripted, but it was fun. And I only lost $20 out of it anyway. So.
Yeah, that was so fun to watch from a spectator perspective. I feel like that whole thing, we were like, what is he thinking? Only $20, like, stuff like that. And then, it was just really fun to watch. Did you think like from his perspective, you're like, is he making a mistake giving me the idol? Like, or were you like, no, this makes sense for both of our games?
Oh, absolutely. If I was watching the actual Survivor and saw someone just say, "Hey, I'm going to give you this idol because it's better for my game," I'd be like, "Are you stupid?" Like I love Chris to death. I really do. But I mean, I'll take the idol, thanks, but I had no clue what he thought he was doing by giving it to me. And there was part of me that didn't want to give it back to him when he needed it, but I knew that if he went, I would be next to go, and I needed more time to figure out my plan of attack if he was going to be voted out. Um, but no, I definitely thought it was a very odd decision to decide to give it to me. I was happy that I did, and luckily I never really needed to use it. But it was definitely an odd thing for me to watch happen in real time.
Okay, we can talk more about the decision to give it back to him once we get to the merge stuff. But that was another question. We're like, did she plan to give it back to him? Did she just swindle him? Like, what was going on there? So that was really, really like a fun little thing that happened. Um, Anything else from pre-swap? Because like you guys said, you do end up winning those next three immunities, so you don't need to go to tribals or any sort of like lingering feelings of like, oh, we should have gotten this person out, or anything like that that might have changed how the game worked out afterward.
I mean, when it comes to the pre-swap stuff, because we never really, ended up going to tribal, we all got to really get to know each other a bit more. At least I was attempting to do that in the case of a swap. There were some people on our tribe that I could tell there was definitely separation in the tribe, even pre-swap, as much as we liked to pretend that, we were Guggenheim strong. That was an absolute lie from everybody. And I knew that Chase had been initially gunning for me from the beginning. and I knew that Gabe was with Chase, which meant that Danny was also with Chase. So in my mind, Chase was kind of the kingpin of that head of the alliance on the tribe. So I think that if we would have ended up going to a tribal, I would have ended up going for one of those three. But at the same time, I knew that us winning immunity meant that if and when we did swap, I would probably more than likely have numbers, which I ended up in a 4-4 split on the swap. But before that, it was kind of just I would just check in with everybody, make sure we're all good. I made polls, make sure we win challenges, and we did. So that kind of worked out in my favor.
Yeah, that was interesting. And so then when you head into the swap, you mentioned the 4-4 split. So you're really happy that you're still with Chris. You're definitely still wary of Chase at this point, ending up on a tribe with him as well, along with Danny. And then on the other side, we have Talia, Nick, Justin, and Floyd. So can you talk about the dynamics on that swap tribe, at least in the earlier rounds?
Well, when we swapped, I had an inkling of an idea that, okay, it's going to be me and Chris against Chase and Danny, and we're going to have to, flood the old Louvre to come to our side. So at first, my first plan of attack was I want to go to Talia because I know that she was pretty much the only girl left on the other tribe, and I wanted to give her an out in that situation so she wouldn't have to be around, just all the guys all the time, because I feel like that would probably make somebody feel like they're on the bottom. And I was right, because she had told me that she really didn't like just being with the guys. And I went to her, and it's funny because I looked at her bio on her Discord page because I just wanted to get to know her a little more, and I saw that she wrote narcissist in her bio, and I went, oh god, I don't know if we're going to get along very well. But then we started talking, and I did really like her, but I could tell that her and Danny were also close, so I was a little leery of her. But then on the other hand, I started talking with Floyd, and he pretty much, after like 30 minutes of conversation, said, okay, I'm going to give you everything on the old Louvre. And he told me that he wanted Nick out in the next vote that we could, and these are the people on the other tribe that he would like to see go, and here are the people on this tribe that he's close with and not close with. He told me that Talia and Nick are really close, so on and so forth. So at first, I felt pretty good because I was getting intel from Talia and from Floyd, both telling me what Danny and Chase were saying about Chris and I. More so Floyd. Floyd was coming to me and saying, hey, Danny and Chase are saying this, this, and this about you. Can you explain why they're saying this? So I think it was almost good for me in a way, because I was able to pull Floyd in from the get-go, and then with Floyd kind of came Talia later in the game once Nick was voted out. So it did work out for me in the end.
Who do you think would have gone at this stage if you guys had gone to maybe 2 or 3 of those tribal councils?
Well, if it was up to me, I would have wanted to go one, Nick, because I knew that Floyd wanted him out and I wanted to solidify trust with him. And then two, probably Chase, if Chase hadn't left the game, because I saw him as my direct social threat from Guggenheim. And then for a third, I would have probably gone Danny as well, because I didn't think that he was with me. So I would have kept Talia, Floyd, and Chris.
Yeah, that's what I figured you would say. That's really interesting. And so this connection that you're building with Floyd here, obviously you're talking about he's giving you a lot of information about the game. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys became close? Because you end up going all the way to the end together, make a lot of strategic decisions together toward the end of the game as well. So this was kind of like, I guess, the start of all that. What was it about Floyd that was especially appealing to you from like a game and a personal perspective?
Well, the first thing I saw from Floyd was a message in the main museum chat the new one, the new Louvre one, and he said it is a nice purple in italics, and I said I think I'm gonna get along with this guy, and I didn't know why. I liked the way that he phrased that. So when I reached out to him, I said, hey, it is a nice purple, and then we started talking about just our hobbies and our likes and dislikes, because that's how I tried to start every conversation. And we started talking about music and realized that we both are very heavily into music and creating music. So we started talking about potentially making a rock version of the Survivor theme song to give to Pat to use for future seasons for like the podcast or something like that. And we're still working on it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
But
you mentioned that. Yeah, so
yeah,
exciting.
it's very exciting, and it will be very good when it comes out. But I think that's where it started, and because of that, I used that with Floyd, like, hey, if you vote me out, we can't finish the Survivor theme song, and he would say the same to me. And I think that little bit of funny back and forth of also like sharing music with each other and sharing, the life of a musician, essentially. It's something that if you're not a part of it, it's hard to understand. And I think that that's where it started. And then also seeing all the funny words that he uses, like fantastical and wondertastic and huzzah. I felt this need to be around him because he's such a kind human and he's so different from anybody I've ever met. So that, and on top of that, I had an aunt who had MS slash Parkinson's, and we kind of a little bit bonded over the fact that we understand the life experience to an extent of that, that kind of illness, and that brought us even closer together. So outside of the game, we know that we were going to be friends afterwards regardless. So I think that it was just the start of a really awesome friendship, and it was, kind of meant to be in that sense.
Definitely. And we see this, in all the tribes you've been on so far, but throughout the merge as well, we see come together what's going to end up being like the duo of the season in you and Chris. Obviously, you already have the history with the idol and everything that's happened before. But once the merge happens, everybody's on a tribe together. And I think from a spectator perspective, we do see you guys working together as a strong duo. What did you think your perspective was from the other players in terms of you and Chris working together at this point?
Knew that they saw Chris and I as a duo, and to be honest, that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted people to see Chris as the leader and me as the person doing all of his bidding, because that puts more of a threat on him than it does on me. So in a way we were working together because I knew that he had allies that he was closer with than I personally was, and I had allies that I was closer with than he personally was. So being able to have two people kind of running opposite sides of the game was something that I wanted to go into it with. I do think that people saw us almost too much as a duo at some points, saying like, "Oh, well, if we don't get Chris out, we have to get DeLuca out." And I realized that that was probably one of my game mistakes, especially with Final Tribal Council people, saying, "Oh, well, how did you distinguish your game from Chris's?" Which is ironic because a lot of the time it was me going to Chris and saying, "Hey, I think we need to get this person out. Do you think you can grab the numbers for that?" And he'd say, "Yep, let me go see what I can do." It wasn't just him running everything, but I think having someone in the game that can do your bidding is always a good idea. I think that I just picked someone who people already saw as a threat, and that was kind of a detriment to my game. But, you know.
Yeah, he definitely had a higher profile strategically, I think. Um, and so to circle back to the idol, was there any hesitation in returning it to him at the merge?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't want to give it back to him because I knew it gave me safety in the game, but at the same point, I knew that him staying in the game one more round with the idol meant me staying in the game one more round, because everyone knew he had the idol and they wanted to, you know, flip the vote on, or some people knew or thought he had an idol, but they wanted to flush it. So knowing they were going to flush the idol for him meant that if I were to play it for myself, the next round I would absolutely be gone. There was no chance that I wouldn't be if he didn't end up having it. So him playing it for himself put off any suspicion that I had one, which I think played to my advantage. Obviously, no one ever wants to give back an idol because you want safety in the game, but I think in this situation, it was good for him to play it so that there was no suspicion on me having it. If I would have played it, everyone who I was aligned with would have said, "Hey, what the hell? Why didn't you tell me you had an idol?" And, the next vote, I would have been seen as even more of a threat because I kept something secret from literally everybody in the game. So,
Okay. This first vote here at the merge is Nick, and as you said before, this was someone Floyd has been wanting out for a while. Obviously, his closest ally is Talia, and that's somebody you connected with on the previous tribe as well. Can you talk a little bit about the fallout from that vote specifically involving Talia and how you sort of played that? Because I know you guys were working together as well, and you did a lot to reassure her in this spot.
so in that situation, I knew that Talia was not only talking to me, but also talking with Danny. And I knew that voting out Nick would be my best case scenario because, as far as I could tell, Floyd was very loyal to me at this point. Whereas Talia, I felt, was a little more likely to go to whoever she wanted to go to give information, to kind of paint herself as someone you didn't want to get out because you could get information from her. So I knew that going with Nick was probably the right decision. But after that, I had gone to Talia and basically explained, like, hey, I'm really sorry that we had to do that. Like, I made her aware that Nick was the vote. And I told her that I was going to do everything I could to make him not the vote, even though that wasn't true. I just wanted to give her some kind of semblance of hope, because Danny had been going to her basically saying, well, if you don't want to go for Nick, I can't help you. So I wanted to be the person to give her, reassurance and sympathy in a way. So I think after that, she trusted me a little bit more than she trusted Danny, because she was pissed at Danny for what he did. Whereas with me, she wasn't, because I was the one that told her what was about to happen. So I think it did end up working out later in the game, but her and Danny, I think, weren't on the same page in that aspect. So I think it worked out for me.
Yeah, we do actually see her and Nick voting Danny this vote, but otherwise pretty unanimous for Nick to go, with Chris kind of throwing his hinky Gabriel vote in the mix.
Oh,
Obviously, at
yeah.
this point, it's the largest kind of pool of people all on one tribe, so there were so many options. What were kind of your considerations coming into the merge? Like, obviously, Nick ends up being the way it goes, but who was kind of in your sort of hit list, so to speak, of who you would have liked to have got at this point?
I mean, at this point, I could have also stood to see Danny go. I mean, Danny played a very hard game when it came to being social with people and strategic and trying to do whatever he could to find idols. Like, Danny was a huge threat in the game, so I probably would have gone for him other than Nick. That's probably who I would have chosen, but I just knew that it wasn't something we could pull, because a lot of people wanted to still stay quote unquote Guggenheim strong, which I think is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. I hate when people do that on Survivor. Um, but that's what a lot of people wanted to do, and I knew that I probably wouldn't be able to single-handedly change the vote there, because so many people wanted to go Nick just because he was an easy consensus to go with. So
We end up seeing the next vote end up being Amoya. And I remember there was kind of, when you'd spoken to Amoya, you'd mentioned that you felt the vote was either going to be between yourself or her. And I think this was something that ended up being a bit of like a point of contention from her end, sort of come final tribal, about whether that was something you actually believed or not. So what was kind of your kind of feeling toward this kind of whole round and how everything ended up going down there?
oh, well, I mean, that's one of my kind of strategy things, is where if I don't want someone to know who the other potential vote is, I'm going to throw myself in there as the decoy from myself, to make myself seem sad, to make myself seem upset, so that they're more likely to say, well, hey, I didn't hear you. Like, you don't have anything to worry about. And that's kind of my in to get to them personally. Um, so, yeah, that was a bold faced lie. I knew it wasn't me, but I didn't want to tell her who it was actually between. And I think I am having a hard time remembering who the other person was in that case scenario. Um, but regardless, I didn't want her to know who the other person was, because then there was a chance of her going to them and saying, "Hey, let's try and pull this together," so on and so forth. So yeah, I lied, and she got upset with me for that, which I understand. But in the game of Survivor, that's kind of the whole point, right? Like, you're supposed to lie to people, you're supposed to backstab. You don't win just based on winning immunity challenges or just by being nice. So I I kind of had to throw myself in there as a way to get her off the trail of what was actually happening.
Yeah. And all this, things are starting to get tense with a few people. We do have the Justin vote, which is almost unanimous. It's another 911, just like the Amoya vote was, because Gabriel had stored his vote on the previous, on the previous one. And then we have the Tom and Danny going back to back. And, we have the whole live tribal debacle. We have the Chris and Danny drama that sort of happens around this point. Obviously, this is a very emotionally charged time for you, especially. But is there anything you want the spectators to know that maybe we didn't see about what happened during this sort of controversy?
Well, firstly, I do want to say that I fully understand that what Danny said to me when he said anyone who keeps Chris around is an idiot. I understand that that was not meant as a, blow directly to my character. Did it suck? Yeah, it did suck. And I went to Chris because Chris was someone that I trusted as a friend, saying like, hey, this really sucked that Danny just said this to me. And then he took it upon himself to go to Danny, and it all blew up. And I want the spectators to know that I tried to make this as clear as I could in my confessional, that I don't think that Danny is a horrible person. I don't think that he meant that as a way to, completely shoot me down and make me feel like crap. I don't think that was what he wanted to do. But then following that in the live tribal, for Danny to take something that I told him in confidence and put it in the public chat as a game move, saying, hey, Chris, you need to own up to what you did and say what you did, while also saying, I won't tell anybody about this. That was really difficult for me. And I know that the spectators saw that, and I felt the need yet again to step in and say, hey, everybody, this is what happened. Everyone shut up and move on about it. But it just turned into this whole crap show. But I do want the spectators to know that there was no bribery involved. Absolutely none. And I wouldn't, this is a Discord server ORG. Like, I'm not gonna take money from somebody in order to advance myself in the game. Like that's a blow to my character, and that's not who I am. So yeah, I want the spectators to know that I understand where people were coming from, and I don't want anybody to go to anybody and, shit on their character or anything like that. Like, that's not okay with me, and I don't want that. So yeah, that's what I want them to know.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reassure you that, from a spectator perspective, I think in both of these instances, like, we both saw you as somebody who's just, like, unfortunately dragged into it. Like, I don't think you did anything wrong in any of these things. It was just really unfortunate that, Chris and Danny are arguing and it happened to involve you, kind of thing. So I'm sorry you had to deal with that. It was really tough to watch, honestly. But I'm glad that it was sort of kind of resolved. I mean, the votes happened and, it is what it is. But yeah, it was really an unfortunate time. So I'm sorry that was part of your experience.
I mean, it's okay. I feel like in situations like this, I know, like, I was aware, like, yes, it's just a game. And I do feel like there were some people who took it a little farther than just the game. And I think that's a testament to how much, like Danny, for example, it's a testament to how much he truly does care about this kind of thing. And he's very passionate about it. And I'll give him that. But it did really suck. I mean, for anyone who watched my video confessional after that, I was crying in my video confessional because, it was really embarrassing for me. But it's nice to know that the specs had my back, and that, people saw that I just ended up yet again being the logs in the fire that Danny and Chris were burning. So after that vote out, things definitely calmed down a lot.
Yeah, and it's at this point where you sort of decide, okay, maybe I need to separate myself more publicly from Chris. Can you talk about that decision and what you meant by that? And, was it you were just gonna try to be more low key with him, or you just really wanted to stop working together, in order to benefit both of you, I guess?
So I think what it initially was that before the whole debacle happened, my plan was to go to Gabe and Danny after the fact and say, hey, I don't want to work with Chris anymore, I want to work with you guys. And I was going to lie to them and say that so I could get information from them, but then it actually did, because of the situation, it did play out that way. This is after the comment from Danny, not after the live tribal. So I ended up going to Danny and Gabe and saying, actually, I do want to try to work with you guys. And I was intending on not working with Chris anymore for that vote and potentially for the rest of the game because of what happened. But what did end up happening is that I was working with Danny for the Justin vote. And then following that, I wanted to go for Tom. And Danny didn't want to go for Tom, which I was like, okay, well, an alliance goes both ways. Let me see what I can do. So I went to Chris and asked him, like, hey, what's going on here? Like, have you, I know we're not necessarily working together much anymore, but I know that you had mentioned wanting to get Tom out. And he was like, yeah, I still do want to get Tom out. I think he's a huge threat. So I kind of re-jumped ship because I didn't feel like I was being listened to by Danny. And I knew that the other kingpin in the game was Chris, and if I wanted the votes to go my way, I had to go the way that I would be able to get done what I wanted to get done. So that's why I went back to Chris, but I wasn't working with Chris for the Justin vote.
Yeah. Yeah, so okay, that's interesting to hear. All right, so we eventually lead into the Danny vote here, and then the Chris vote. So how did Chris voting out and sort of like this very close vote happening here, affect your game moving forward? What were your thoughts here at this juncture in the game?
When Chris was voted out?
Yes. Sorry, yes, I muted. Exactly.
So I knew that at some point Chris was going to be voted out regardless. Like I obviously knew that was going to happen at some point, and I was hoping that I could be the one to do it because I thought that would look really good for my resume, and I was hoping to do that around final 6, final 5, but Gabe kind of beat me to it. Um but I was also aligned with him, and I think that both of those things are possible to do, to be aligned with someone while also wanting to cut them to benefit your game at some point. But following that, I did feel like I was somewhat on the bottom at this point. I knew I had to kind of claw my way out of the hole. And then after that, with Joey leaving, Joey being my other very, very close ally, I knew that I needed to try and pull at least one person to be completely loyal to me after this. And I knew that Floyd had flipped on me and had voted Chris because he felt it was the only time he'd be able to do that, which, I can understand that. I think that was one of his good game moves, and if I wasn't planning on voting Chris and getting him out later, I would have probably done the same. Um, but following that, I went to Floyd kind of saying like, "Hey, you are my only chance here. We really need to be working together if I want any kind of a chance in this game." And I was honest with him. I said, "I think that Gabe will 100% beat me at the end if he gets there, and I really want to play this game for me, and it's really important for me." And I think because of the personal connection that Floyd and I already had, he had said, "Okay, you know what? I'm going to work with you until the end now," especially with Joey leaving, because Floyd really felt bad about that. He thought that Joey leaving was his fault because Joey was so upset. So being able to pull Floyd in from an emotional standpoint because of that, I think is what I needed to do, but I definitely did feel like I was on the bottom for a bit there.
Yeah, you did mention about how close you and Joey were, and that was probably with Chris leaving, probably one of the people you would have maybe leaned on the most until you ended up kind of getting as close as you did with Floyd. What was that kind of like for you? Obviously, it was a difficult situation surrounding them leaving the game and whatnot, but how did you feel kind of at that point that what your kind of real options were and yeah, how were you feeling about the whole thing, I suppose?
Well, at that point, I I knew that Joey had been really hurt because of what had happened, and he had talked to me about it saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but I think I'm going to have to leave the game." So at least I was somewhat mentally prepared for it if he did decide to go, which he did. But I knew that in order to keep myself in the game, I needed to try to strengthen my alliances with any of the old Guggenheim members that I could, aka except for Gabe, because I knew that he was going to go for me afterwards. But I needed to convince Cody and Katie that Gabe was a much bigger threat than I was. And I also wanted to try and pull Talia in because I knew that I had some kind of a connection with her already, so I wanted to pull all the stops that I could and try and get in with her. And it did end up working because she ended up flipping on Gabe and voting with me for the Gabe vote out, which was very nice to see. So I think at that point, I just had to pull out all the stops of my social game and try and force conversations with all the people left in the game about things that I knew that they cared about. So they felt like I cared about them as a person rather than just caring about them as a number in the game. And I think it did work for me in that sense. So I did pull myself off the bottom by doing that. Um, but I think that if I hadn't have gone as far as I did, that I probably would have been the vote out there. But it worked out for me. So
What was your relationship like with Katie during the merge?
um I mean, Katie is a hard one to read. She and I had talked a lot about, our common interest in Drag Race and a couple running jokes about a couple different things, but I think Katie wasn't as, emotionally invested in the game as other people, so it was a little harder to try and get her to, want to work with me just based on social stuff. So I had to really try and keep a constant conversation with her because I think with Katie, her whole thing is if you talk to me, I probably won't vote you out. But if you're not making an effort to talk to me at all, you're an easy vote for me. So I had to try and start up conversations with her as often as I could. And a lot of the time it was just about the current season of Drag Race and who we wanted to win and the challenges that were happening on Drag Race. Um, so that's kind of the extent of our relationship. I didn't get to know her very personally because she wasn't the type to open up as much. So we had a somewhat good connection, I guess, but she was more I'm gonna do what I want to do, and she was more aligned with Cody than she was with me, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that's probably all part of what ended up helping you kind of get through these next few votes. Where I'll be honest, I was worried that how you would make it without immunity wins. You did have this sort of, title of being the social threat that might be able to like kind of do really well in the end. And I think we saw Talia kind of wavering on the Gabriel vote. She did make parchments for the both of you, so as I hold my hands up, I don't remember exactly what was going down fully, but I wasn't sure which way it was going to go. And then we do see towards the end, Katie and Cody do end up siding with you to do the Gabe vote. Um, the next one we end up having was the final five. And I
Ugh.
think this one was one where a lot of sites were kind of set on Cody. And I think people at this point were probably looking at him as potentially the next person to get out. How did it feel like? I'm right in thinking that he won immunity this round, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Yes. And so yeah, at the point that you see that he ends up getting this immunity, how are you feeling?
Well, at this point, I had a feeling that when I saw that me, Cody, and Talia had all tied, I had to really think to myself, who would I rather work with in this situation? And truthfully, I was hoping that either Talia or I would win because I wanted Cody out. I wanted to cut him. I wanted him gone because one, personally, we got along, well enough. But there were some things that he had said. Like I remember Chris told me once that um Cody and him were talking and people were talking about Drag Race in the main chat, and Cody messaged Chris and said, "I don't really want to be a part of this conversation." And this is a while ago, and I was like, that didn't sit right with me. So he had always kind of been in my sights as a person that I wanted to get out. And I was only 17 seconds behind him for the tie. And if I would have won, I genuinely think that Floyd, Talia, and myself would have voted Cody and he would have been out. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. And that truly was my hardest vote, I think. I wanted nothing more than to not have to vote Talia there. But I knew that if she was able to, scrap up the votes to keep herself in the game, that she would have won hands down because she was doing a phenomenal job as a player. But it just didn't shake out that way. So if I had the choice to go back and change that, I definitely would have voted Cody out there if I had the chance to.
Yeah, we saw he had the challenge disadvantage, but somehow it just wasn't enough to best him this time. But oh yeah, this was another vote where I thought, oh, this is not looking good for DeLuca, but you managed to get the votes again to kind of get yourself another round. And then comes the final four, and at this point, again, I'm personally in the same sort of headspace of like DeLuca could be in trouble if she doesn't win immunity. And so obviously there's you and Floyd who are arguably a bit of a duo, and then also Katie and Cody who are also arguably a bit of a duo. And so um, we did potentially think spectating that Floyd could vote with you, but we weren't necessarily sure that he was going to, given that I think you had a lot of stock, like winner equity as far as that goes. So, um, talk us through that round and kind of what conversations were going on as well.
So basically, what had happened was Floyd was aware of the fact that Cody was, in Talia's words, being a bit condescending to her. And Floyd didn't like that. And because Floyd and Talia were also good friends. So that was kind of an angle in my pocket that I could throw out, as well as the fact that I went to Floyd just basically saying, hey, I think we need to split the vote between Katie if I even want a chance of getting to final tribal council. I didn't say, hey, would you be willing to vote Katie? I tried to tell him what I wanted him to do without making it seem like, I'm telling you what to do. I wanted it to be a, hey, you know how important this game is to me. We've been so close throughout the entirety of this game, and I want to go to final tribal council with you. I want to sit next to you at tribal council. And if you're willing to do that, I'd be eternally grateful. And he told me, I've wanted you to win for a long time. And he said, you can look at my confessionals after the game is over and realize that. And he was being honest. But I think it came down to the fact that Cody made a huge game mistake by coming to me and saying, hey, I'm voting you out this round. Just wanted to let you know. And that doesn't sit with me. I'm not the type to be told, hey, this is what's going to happen. And it's all on my hand and you have no choice in the matter because, up to this point in the game, I have been doing a very good job socially, and I think that him telling me that was him trying to, make me feel better and trying to make, trying to get a jury vote out of me because he thought I was going to be out of the game. And I wasn't going to let that happen. So I went to the only person I felt like I could really trust there. And I went to Floyd and just kind of, explained my stance on the matter. And he was with me. Luckily, he was with me. And I think that was a testament to my gameplay as well because I was able to get close enough to him emotionally outside of the game to convince him to pretty much almost, even though he did end up winning, good job, Floyd. Um, Even though, he knew that I was going to be a huge threat at Final Tribal Council, I was still able to, get him to vote with me and force a tie, which, I think that's a huge testament to my gameplay. So that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, I want to completely agree with you there, and I'm glad you do see it that way because I think at that point, watching again, we did not see it as something that was particularly beneficial for Floyd to do. Um, Ultimately, we realize how things ultimately come together in what we've kind of described as a bit of a perfect storm of events. But at the time, it seemed like that was really like, yeah, credit to DeLuca for managing to do something that doesn't seem like it's in Floyd's best interest, but appealing to kind of like that social game side of things and just him wanting to be there with you and you getting that across and you managed to get the tie and so we then do have a tiebreaker and so you and Katie have to do I think it's 3 puzzles
Yep.
um live and walk us through how you're feeling as this was going on.
So when I knew there was going to be a tiebreaker, I thought to myself, like, what could the tiebreaker potentially be? Like what are the odds of what it's going to be? And I thought to myself, I remember last season they did a lot of slide puzzles that were the logo of the season, and I thought to myself, like, well, crap, if it's a slide puzzle, I'm screwed. So I took the in between time to watch YouTube videos on how the heck do you do a slide puzzle? Is there a strategy to it? And I practiced for like 2 hours before doing it, and I figured out the algorithm. So I did that, and now I feel really confident on slide puzzles, which is really cool because I never knew how to do them. So I practiced for it, and I honestly wasn't super nervous about it because and this isn't, a dig on Katie or anything, but her and I had both spoken about the fact that challenges weren't exactly our strong suit if they were puzzles. So I knew that I would have a chance at beating her. I also practiced the Tower of Hanawai, however you pronounce it, thing, and I have a game on my phone that I play already that is basically that game. So I felt like I had an edge there when that did pop up. No, but I was definitely nervous, but I knew that this was my last ditch effort to make it to the end, and it did work out for me. So I think I did fairly well with that.
Yeah, and you haven't
Yes.
been a slouch at challenges to this point either. You've won these two really huge challenges. You won, I think it was Touchy Subjects and then the Guess Who challenge, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, and so that's really awesome. So you have at this point like three like very different challenge wins to your name. So what are you feeling here about like your resume in general? You made this incredible social move at getting Floyd to tie the vote with you here at Final Four. You have immunities under your belt, so you have a good physical game. Strategically, obviously, you've shined, you've gotten this far. So how are you feeling going into Final Tribal?
Well, to be completely honest, I think I kind of flubbed in my opening speech because I had this kind of dichotomy morally in my brain of, do I want to say outright that I manipulated people because these are people that I now consider my friends, and I think there was part of me that definitely did want to make friends with these people. I'm not going to sit in a conversation on Discord for 3 hours with somebody about a topic that I don't care about. Like I value my time more than that. But I knew that the jury probably wouldn't want to hear that, oh, I just came here to make friends, blah blah blah. But at the same time, I did manipulate people and I did get them to go the way that I wanted to solely based off of getting into their heads and getting into them emotionally. I mean, that's how I won Touchy Subjects because I knew so much about everybody. So I personally going into Final Tribal Council, I had a lot of confidence in myself, thinking, I'm great in challenges, I'm great socially, and I'm great strategically. Like in my mind, if I was on the jury, I would have my vote. But I think that everybody thinks that about themselves. I knew there were some people that definitely wouldn't be voting me solely based off of emotional conflict, aka Danny, and I figured Amoya because I knew they were very close. But I thought that I had a pretty decent chance. But then seeing how Final Tribal Council started to play out, I realized, if Cody had played the style of game that I had, he would have been praised for it because I played a predominantly social game. And seeing how, people were reacting to the things that I was saying made me realize, like, oh crap, maybe I don't have this as in the bag as I would have, um, if I would have been a little bit more cutthroat in my opening speech. But I was very confident going into Final Tribal Council, and truthfully, I'm very happy for Floyd that he won. But I do think that I also there's another reality where I also won because I think that I played a pretty damn good game and that I deserved it.
I think it's understandable that you probably didn't expect to get Danny or Moya's votes, and you even stopped answering Danny's questions at one point during Final Tribal Council. So who were the votes that you were focused on? Who did you think would maybe be swing votes, or people who like you felt like you would need to win over?
I I thought I would need to win over Tom, Justin, Katie, and Nick. Those were the four that I felt I really needed to try and pull through getting a vote from them. Um, Mostly because with Tom, I saw his questions as, he really wants to know about gameplay aspects. And I think that playing to the fact that I was strategic with him was a good idea, trying to work that angle. And then with Nick, trying to pull the more funny angle, with Justin trying to pull the more snarky angle, even though I don't think that really worked out in my best interest. But those were the four that I was most aiming to try and flip because I felt that I had Talia and Chris, at the very least, I had their votes in the bag.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I think that tracks as well. So if you had to rewrite your opening speech, what would you have wanted to say differently?
I would have started it with "I manipulated all of you, ha 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 ha." Um, I mean, I think I would have just started it by saying, like, I want you all to know that while I do care about the people that I made connections with individually, I was trying to manipulate you to want to open up to me. And I think that's predominantly what the jury wanted to hear. They wanted to hear that I played a super cutthroat game. And that is the truth. It is true that I tried to get down to the core of people to try and, get them to work with me by way of making them feel bad for ever having to vote me out because they think, oh, well, she's such a good friend. Like, we've talked about all these personal things. Like, yeah, that was my angle. But there is another part of truth to the fact that, you know, those things weren't just done for the game. Like, I do genuinely care about people, and I did genuinely care about the conversations I was having and the things I was learning about people. But this jury specifically didn't want to hear that. But if it was coming from a guy, I feel like they would have said, oh, he's such a nice person. Like, he just wanted to have fun and play a game. But because I'm a girl, nobody wanted to hear that. And also because I'm a mom, I feel like a lot of people saw that as fake. Like, moms never win in Survivor. That's kind of a trope, right? So I think that I would have just gone a little more cutthroat with my responses and in my opening speech.
That last point especially ties into a question that Steven actually asked us to ask you, which is, do you feel like your perception in the game matched the overall sentiment mothers get in Survivor?
Well, absolutely. I definitely think so. I think that people see on Survivor, people see moms as, oh, we need to get them out. They can't make it to Final Tribal Council because they'll win, right? Because they think that moms have some kind of weird upper edge in this game, even though they never win for that specific sentiment. And I think that because I'm a mom, people saw me as kind of a threat in that way of, oh god, well, if she makes Final Tribal Council, she's going to bring up the fact that she has a new baby and how hard it was for her to play the game, and we have to give her the vote for that. um so I do think that that trope fits here. I mean, I didn't win, I was very close, but I didn't win. And I think that, that definitely tied into how Final Tribal Council played out for me.
Yeah, so from a spectator perspective, we saw tribal council happening, and coming in, I think a lot of us felt like you would probably be the favorite to win. And then we see sort of like a pro Cody sentiment happening. In Floyd's opening speech, he specifically basically says, "Hey, vote for DeLuca here." So what were your thoughts about like, how things looked coming in, and did you see like a shift in things changing? Of course, later we have the controversy with Cody as well. So what were your thoughts like? Because this was like a roller coaster seeing everything happening at Final Tribal. So what kind of emotions did you go through? When did you start seeing like a shift in how people were thinking and what they were saying?
Well, initially, the first thing I noticed is when I saw Cody's speech get posted, I said, oh god, I'm not reading that. And then realized, oh god, no one's going to read mine because I don't want to read Cody's. Um, So I think that maybe making my speech a little shorter may have been a good idea, but whatever. At first, I saw that Cody was kind of playing to what he thought the jury wanted to hear, but he sounded like kind of like a robot to me a little bit. It seemed like he was trying to say, this is my game. This is how I played. I was strategic and a challenge beast. And I was like, I don't really like that very much. But I did see that because he was the first person answering questions, I noticed that the people on the jury seemed to be enjoying what he was saying. And my strategy for Final Tribal Council was to wait until at least one person responded so I could get a feel of how the jury was kind of leaning. And I did notice that people were seeing him as, a strategist all of a sudden when he really wasn't. So at that point, I think I'm trying to remember whose questions he was answering. I think it may have been Chris's or Tom's, where I read and went, oh crap, he has this whole resume that he's written up and he's really trying really hard. So that's when I decided, like, okay, I need to present myself as more of a threat than Cody was. And I don't think that was very hard to do. But I think also the fact that there were a lot of people, aka Danny, Amoya, and probably Gabe, who would have been more likely to vote for Cody over me due to emotional things. So I had to really try and, pull the people who I thought might vote for me, aka Justin and Tom and Nick and Katie. So I think the point that I started to get worried was when I saw the responses to Cody's initial answers.
Which of the final votes was most surprising to you?
The one vote for Cody.
Yeah, and that was Amoya. She did vote earlier on than I think most of the jury, if I remember correctly. But yes, that was surprising to us as well. So since it came down to such a close vote, it goes to the tiebreaker where I'm sure once you knew that that Cody was going to be the tiebreaker, did you think he was going to go for Floyd here?
Personally, at first, no. I was actually kind of surprised when I saw that he went for Floyd. And, as much as I don't want to think this, part of me thinks that A, it's because I'm a girl and he seems like the type to not want me to win because of that, even though we had been working very closely together pretty much the entirety of the game. But two, I think it was because he saw that I had kind of bashed his gameplay in, oh God, whose question was it? I can't remember whose question. It might have been Tom's. They said, who do you think doesn't, like, why? Oh, it was Justin. He said, why don't the other two deserve to win? And I think that Cody may have seen that and felt a little butthurt about the fact that I said him, about what I said about him. And personally, I think that that's a very odd move to make if you're voting for someone who should win if they're fighting for their place in the game. But regardless, yes, I was very surprised to see that he voted for Floyd.
Since it came down to just one vote essentially here at the end, I'm sure it's easy to like think back and like, oh, I would have changed this, I would have changed that. Can you pinpoint like anything you would have changed with one of these jurors who didn't vote against you that you could have changed in your game or would have wanted to? Or what if that just maybe, are you sort of satisfied and saying, you know what I did got me to the ends and got me this close, so I don't regret it?
I think really, I was only one vote off, and I think there are two people that I could have had slightly different responses to in the final jury questions that may have gotten me their vote, and that would be Justin and Katie. With Katie, at the end, she asked, what's your last ditch effort to try to get me to vote for you? And I think that I went a little too silly with the question because, to be honest, I was so tired about talking about my gameplay. But Floyd actually ended up going a little more in depth with his gameplay, just a little bit, and I think that's what Katie wanted to hear. So there's one I probably would have said, "Hey, you should vote for me because I successfully got you out at the final 5 or the final 4 and, we had a fair fight to the end and we were close, you know what I mean?" And then also with Justin, I think I probably would have left out the part where I said, "Hey, and that social game that you think is non-existent is what got you voted out." I might not have said that.
Okay, I can totally see that. Um, so here I'll ask another question that we have from Steven. He wants to know, what do you think the benefits were to playing an emotional game and how it helped you stay in until Final Tribal Council? Also, what do you think your social game did well and what do you think lacked in your social game?
So I think that if I could go back and do it all again, I might play somewhat less of an emotionally charged game, mostly because it was so hard for me emotionally outside of the game. I mean, I know specs have seen me say this, but I'm autistic and I get overwhelmed very, very easily. And I think that I put a little bit too much stock in the game rather than paying attention to what happened outside the game, like in real life. Um, So I think that playing an emotional game did benefit me within the game, but outside the game, it definitely did not. I was an emotional wreck for the entirety of the time that I played this game. Um, but in the game, I think that playing emotionally was kind of my, you know, my best part of playing really was my emotional game. I was able to, get people to vote with me. I was able to pick at people's brains and really get to know them and use that to my advantage. And I think that, playing an emotional game is kind of my claim to fame at this point. But I do think it was a detriment to me outside the game, if that makes sense.
Absolutely hear that. And I think to a certain extent, you kind of had to play the hand you were dealt. There were certain situations that became emotional that just weren't even necessarily due to any of your own actions, really, and things kind of happening beyond that. So I forgot to comment on it earlier, but I think it's a real testament when sort of those things happen, when someone's able to kind of put out, say, like a message in tribal like you did and try and diffuse the situation. I think that was so well done, and I just commend you like for your ability to deal with all the things that came your way throughout. And like you said, there's probably another universe where you do win, and I don't think the universe is that far different from this one. As you mentioned, Katie's kind of tiebreaker kind of came down to something potentially a bit silly. And I think when we spoke to Floyd, I haven't heard from Katie directly on this, but he might have said that just his hurdle answer might have been the thing that tipped the edge. And yeah, as you mentioned, who was it? Sorry, it was Justin. Could have been another one that could have gone other way, and even Gabriel's vote kind of got, I think, from what I've seen postseason, seemed to be like he didn't necessarily want Floyd to not get votes, and he wasn't expecting him to win. But seeing the sort of personalized podcast that he made kind of made him go that way. So
Yeah.
I think you were just a sliver away, and it must maybe I don't know if it's good or annoying to hear, but I just think yeah, you definitely played a game to be proud of. So I'm glad to hear that you are still kind of standing by that because absolutely from a spectator's point, I've never seen 70 like almost 75%, 70% of people voting a person to be player of the season. I don't think so. Honestly, props to you for that. Um, and then even then, just the tiebreaker coming from Cody, uh, we don't know necessarily what that was. We can only, I guess, speculate. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of come in and say, yeah, I think you played a damn good game and one you should be proud of. And it's yeah, it just goes that way sometimes, I guess. Is there anything you've kind of now that the season's like kind of all said and done, anything that you like you're feeling or you kind of want to say, just in general?
Well, first I'll quote Jeff Probst by saying, the best players almost always never win. Like some of the best players of Survivor have never won Survivor. And I think that one thing that I do want to say is that, and I do think that there are some spectators that would agree with me on this, is that, Cody's gameplay, if he would have played the game that I had, or even if I was just a guy and I played the game that I had, I think that I would have had at least 2 or 3 more votes at the final tribal council. I think it would have been a full sweep. And I do think that that's something that, is deserved to be talked about. I think that women or, people presenting as women in this game a lot of the time are overlooked and seen as their emotional gameplay is just a factor of being a woman. And that their strategic gameplay is just a factor of being a woman. And I'm tired of that narrative. I think that if I would have been more cutthroat with my answers, that people would have said, oh, she's such a B word. I don't know if I can curse. But they would have, said that I was being annoying or that I was being, bossy or whatever. But then by me not saying things as cutthroat, people saw me as weak and saw me as I wasn't strategic. So I don't think there was really a way I could have gone about it that would have helped my case that much more. So I think that that's something that necessarily needs to be talked about. And at the same time, we all know Cody's comment. And honestly, in a weird way, I'm glad that was brought up because I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think that seeing Talia just completely go off on Cody, I mean, I am so proud of her for doing that. But that was the thing in the season that I was honestly, weirdly enough, most proud of, to see such a big community of people coming together and saying, no, you're wrong about something that is such a huge issue that's happening in today's society. So I was happy to see that conversation being had. So I think that would be it, though.
I definitely echo both your sentiments. And yeah, DeLuca, I think there were several times throughout the season where just as a spec, I was frustrated because I felt like your really good gameplay was getting overshadowed by other people. Like people were taking, like, sort of not even taking, but being given credit for moves that I thought you were making. And I think it, the role of gender definitely comes into that discussion as well. So it was frustrating to watch and to see you not getting credit for those things at the time, and then to see how Final Tribal played out. You're definitely justified in feeling that way, I think. But like Nico said, you should definitely be proud of your game. Very deserving player of the season, joining the legacy of 3 in a row girl boss player of the season. So we love
Hey.
that for us. um, so yeah, that was really, really that's really a poignant thing to say. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Um, Looking back, like, I mean, is this something you would ever do again? Would you play another org?
I mean, there's definitely potential there. I think there were some things that happened this season, as we all know, that kind of soured the experience for me. But I like to think in my heart of hearts that that's not something that happens on every season, and it was just a state of circumstance, and that it wasn't something that always happens. So I think there's definitely potential there for me playing another season. It might be a while so that I can emotionally recharge and get back into it. But I will say that going back into it, if I were to do it again, I feel much more prepared to do it because I know, how people would perceive me, and I know what I did wrong, what I did right, and how to go back into it with a clear head. So I think I would do it again. It's just it would take a lot of convincing.
Do you have any words of advice for other people who have not played orgs before about what they should expect and how they should act?
Yeah, it is a much bigger time and emotional commitment than you could ever possibly expect it to be. Go into it with the understanding that it is just a game, and that is something I had to constantly remind myself of, that these people, if you're getting voted out or you're on block or people are saying something about your gameplay, it's not a direct hit at you. And I think that one big piece of advice that I would give is that if the game is starting to become too much for you, take a couple hours away and do something that you enjoy outside of the game. So that you don't end up in a situation where you feel completely burnt out and you're, you know, um, not acknowledging your daily responsibilities, aka me, because you're so, invested in the game. Like, this is a Discord survivor game, and while it's fun and it's crazy at times, it's important to take yourself and your mental health into consideration. And I think a lot of the time we can forget that because we're so passionate about this. That's a testament to this really small community in this little corner of the internet that we're all so passionate about it. But taking time for yourself is 110% paramount. So that's the advice that I would have mostly.
Retweet. Like, honestly, could not agree with that more. Like, that's very, very well said. That's all I have. Any other questions you have, Nico?
No, I totally hear what you're saying on the commitment, and I think it is very easy to kind of get so wrapped up in this potentially little sphere of the internet. We're all potential, or not everyone even who plays these are necessarily Survivor fans, but we do come from this world and we get very passionate about it, and it's easy to lose sight of some of the other things. And yeah, it's just nice when all is said and done to kind of realize this is all supposed to be for fun, really. It's lovely to see people play hard, and then we've got content to kind of do this about. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's hopefully something that's going to make people's experience just enjoyable. So I definitely want to say that watching you, DeLuca, was a delight, and if you do play again, I would definitely be interested in watching that. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me.
Awesome. Any last words for the wormies, DeLuca?
Oh my gosh, my wormies. I will say that Twilight is the best movie ever created, and if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. There's
Cut the clip.
that.
Cut the clip.
I don't know. I think what I want to say is that one of my favorite parts about playing this game was genuinely having this open place to write whatever the heck was on my mind in my confessionals, and I'm so utterly grateful to the spectators for listening to me ramble and all of a sudden knowing that there's like this DeLuca cult that happened, which I could not be more proud of. Um no, I think at the end of the day, I'm very happy that I did this. I think I've gained a lot of confidence in myself just as a person through playing this game. Um and I'm excited to see where it goes. If anything, I'm excited that I got to partake in this little ORG, and it's given me the confidence that I need to actually apply for the real thing. Um so maybe y'all will see me on your TV screens at
Oh
some
my
point.
god. Oh my god. We can say we knew you. That's amazing.
Oh
Incredible.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just gonna film one of those crazy weird videos, and I will ask you all for help in writing my interview.
Yes, cannot recommend highly enough. Oh my God, that's awesome. I can't wait. Well, thank you so much again for your time, DeLuca. This has been an absolute pleasure. It was really, really interesting to talk to you. We got a lot of interesting game insight, but also you're just like a lovely, fun person to be around. So it's just been a delight. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
All right, and I'm actually going to let DeLuca's past self have the last word here and insert the goodbye song now. So see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, goodbye, good friends, goodbye. 'Cause now it's time to go. But hey, I say that that's okay. 'Cause we'll see you very soon, I know. It'll get better as we go. That's from Bear in the Big Blue House, if you don't know it. And now you play our closing note. Yeah!